good to see you all at today's Lunch and Learn, and we are in for a treat today. If you were here earlier this year, you may have had an opportunity to hear Dan and Marsha Schauer speak before on conflict and marriage and managing couple conflict. They did such a great job. We've invited them back. Dan and Marsha will also be back this fall, and they're going to be talking about parenting with love and logic, and then they'll be back again next spring. And so on your tables today is our updated Lunch and Learn schedule that begins in September and goes through December. And so we've got some great topics, and that's just being rolled out brand new today. Want to encourage you to check that out. Feel free to take these home with you, share them with other people. We've got, I think, 1,000 of these printed up, and we'd love to have more people be aware of these as we kind of move through things. Next week, I'm going to be speaking one more time this summer on dealing with difficult people in your life, and we all have difficult people in life. I am some people's difficult people in their life, and you are too, all right? So we're going to talk about how do we deal with the difficult people that we have in our lives. Also on your table today is a brochure that looks like this. We rolled this out last week, and it was in our services on Sunday, but this is just kind of a general brochure about everything that the Family Resource Initiative has to offer, and I want to encourage you to share this as well with people around you. Inside of that is a little flyer about Re-Engage. It's a marriage ministry, and so as we talk about the 5 love languages today, those are languages that relate not just in marriage, but with kids and people you work with. But as it relates to marriage, I'm going to let the Schauers teach about it. But it is something that is important to understand. And there's so many things in marriage that if we want to see our marriages grow, deeper Re-Engage is good for. And I hope that's every marriage. And so whether or not your marriage is in a crisis or you're like at a 7 and you want to get to a 9 in your marriage, Re-Engage is for you. And that launches again in September. And really excited about that. We have space for 70 couples this year. So 140 people beginning again September 5th. And want to make sure you sign up for that. This Sunday is going to be a big deal here at Wooddale Church, too. The next 4 weeks, we're going to be talking about how do you connect and some of the different groups that we have available here. You'll see when you come into church this week a connection guide with all of the studies and groups that are available this year at Wooddale. Family Resource will have a table that will let you know, too, just about some of our other offerings like Financial Peace University, our grief groups, and other groups that are launching this fall. And so I want to encourage you to come and visit. And we are giving away the next couple Sundays, we're going to give away 1 Re-Engage registration for a couple. And so if that's something you're interested in and you want to be able to do that for free, not only is it a Re-Engage registration, but we're going to have a date night kit that's part of that. And so you get dinner at the Cheesecake Factory and a movie and some other fun stuff that's in that package. And so I want to encourage you to come and visit those tables and check out everything else that's happening on Sunday. We're also giving away a registration for Financial Peace University. So if you've got some people in your life who could benefit from a little bit of financial coaching, make sure they visit our table on Sunday as well. Well, Dan and Marsha have been friends of mine for a number of years, and I'm going to have them start making their way up here. Dan is a senior pastor, church planting pastor, campus pastor now at Crossroads Church, but planted one of the churches that the church that I pastored in Woodbury started. And Dan has just been such a faithful friend, and God has used he and Marsha in incredible ways. And Marsha is a licensed marriage and family therapist. She works right down the street from Wooddale Church at United Healthcare and has done great things. So I love having these two come together because they bring the perspective of both a pastor and a therapist, and they do it great. So Dan and Marsha.
All right. Thanks so much, Brian. We'll start by telling a little bit about us. Brian gave a great introduction, but, just a little bit more about who we are. So Marsha and I have been married over 28 years now. So, and about 27 of them were great. So, no, we, like most marriages, we had a few rough times, but I grew up here in the Twin Cities in Hastings, went to the University of Minnesota, and then went out to Pasadena, California to go to Fuller Theological Seminary to get my Master's of Divinity degree. And there's where I met Marsha. She was Fuller has a school of psychology, and she was doing her marriage and family therapy degree. So we met out there, got married out in California, and then there was this arm twisting time. Trying to get her to move back to Minnesota because we were trying to, it's like, are we going to settle here in Pasadena? Where are we going to settle and raise our family and, do life? So there's this, like Brian said, with this opportunity opened up to plant a church back in Inver Grove Heights. And we were like, well, that's real close to where I grew up. And we prayed about it, and so we ended up moving back home from my home and planning a church called New Heights Community Church, which was lasted about 17 years, and then we ended up merging with Crossroads Church, which ended up being a great meeting between for both of our churches. It's been better for both of us. So I'll let Marsha tell you a little bit about herself.
Sure. Hi. So as Brian said, I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and for many years I worked as a therapist in a clinic, but for the past 11, 12 years, I've been working for Optum, just down the street on Shady Oak there, as a care coordinator for people with mental health disabilities, helping them navigate the healthcare system. And for the past year or so, I've been managing a team of care coordinators. But I don't actually come into the office very often because I get to work from home most of the time. So,
which you like very much.
Yes.
So, opening question, how many of you have read the 5 Love Language books? Okay, so most of you. I was kind of suspecting that. It's a very popular book. So if you haven't read the book, we're going to be doing a summary of the main points of the book, and then along with some real-life applications and insights. But if you already have read it, you don't have to start heading for the door yet. I still think there's some insights and some wisdom you can gain from that. So.
Oh, okay. And so hopefully you'll find this worthwhile. So I want to start out by talking about the experience of falling in love with somebody, right? Hopefully all of us have experienced that. It's just glorious, right? It's so wonderful to be in love and to be like so obsessed with the other person, and like all of your body just is singing with joy because you are so happy, you're walking on clouds, like when you're first falling in love with somebody, right? It's just wonderful, and you want to do all these things, go out of your way to be generous to them, to do things for them just to see that smile on their face. And it doesn't really take any effort because your focus is on the other person and making them happy, and it just feels natural to do it. And you tend, when you're in love, not to notice very many negative things about the person that you're in love with, even if your friends and family try to point them out to you, right? And you're like, oh, it'll be fine. We're just perfect for each other. I have found the one. And we're just so happy. Like, if there's any differences, I'm sure we'll be able to work it out because we get along so well and we communicate so well, right? So that's generally how it is when you're falling in love with somebody, and really, like, you are just so focused on them. We have a 19-year-old son, and we were just recently in Korea in May, and it was funny. He has, like, first serious girlfriend that he's really taken with, and everywhere we went in Korea, like, he kept on seeing things. It's like, oh, Nicole would like this, right? I mean, she didn't go with us, obviously, but he kept on buying things everywhere we went just because he wanted to get them for Nicole. It's like, you might want to save some of your money, but that's just how it is. Like, when you're in love with somebody, you just are overflowing with love and wanting to do things for them.
So what you're saying is, like, when I go on trips without you, I don't come back with anything.
Well, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So what happens after a couple of years of being in love with somebody? What usually happens? Reality sets in, right? And you come back to earth, right? Your feet are walking on earth, and you are usually dealing with arguments about how we're going to pay this bill, or in-laws, or you get tired, you get crabby, and you have all these things you have to accomplish, and they're what you thought were like adorable quirks about the other person start really getting under your skin and can be very frustrating and annoying, right? And at that point in a couple's relationship, usually people either start looking around to capture that feeling with someone else, right? Or maybe you're already married, maybe you already have kids. You know, you settle into a life of routine and work and family, right? And focus on other things. And the busyness of life kind of takes over. And the age-old question is, why doesn't that feeling of being in love last forever? Or people would say, why doesn't love last, right? Why isn't it happily ever after like it is in movies, right? And like we said, it's because you have to come back down to earth. You can't sustain that level of intense preoccupation and all the chemical things that are happening to your body. And that's, I mean, really how God designed us as human beings, that there would be this glorious time period in your life, and so that you get together and you might start a family, and but you have to do all the other things that life requires. And yeah, you can't maintain that level of intense focus and obsession with the other person. So it is really a very predictable, yeah, it's a very predictable, instinctual, biological, biochemical process, that process of falling in love and then eventually kind of slowly coming back down to earth, right? And there's been lots of studies done on that, and most agree that it lasts an average of maybe 2 years. But sometimes it could be weeks, or it could just, you know, it could be a few more years, right? But it's rare to find somebody who is that obsessed with their spouse 20 years later, right? So we wanted to talk about our author, Gary Chapman, who has written the 5 love languages. He talks about that each person has an emotional love tank, right? And I think that makes sense to a lot of us. Tank, like the gas tank in your car, right? When you have, when you feel loved, when you feel cared for, like your tank gets filled, right? And it's difficult to keep going or keep doing loving things if your tank is getting lower and lower. So if your tank is pretty low, you're almost running to running on fumes, it's going to be hard to like zip across town and do a bunch of things and pick this person up, that person up, maybe go on a road trip, because you don't have any reserve to give anymore. So it is like that with receiving love. Each person has a deep need to feel loved and to feel valued, not only from their spouse or partner, but really, like you can feel loved by God, you can feel loved by your parents, other people. So, I mean, there are other ways that the tank can be filled, but I think most people kind of look to their spouse as one of the primary sources of, if you're married, to fill your love tank. And when you don't feel that coming from your spouse, you tend to get resentful, right? Frustrated. You might start criticizing them. You might start withholding your love from them. You might punish them in whatever way. You might lash out at them when you feel like your tank is not being filled by your partner. And it's especially frustrating for couples when maybe you are trying to show your love, right? You are trying hard to express your love to the other person, but the other person doesn't seem to recognize, or it doesn't seem to connect with them. That's what they're doing. So then you feel rejected and really resentful. Here I am doing all this to try to show you that I love you, but you keep complaining, right? Yep. So our love tank gets filled when people express love for us in a way that we will recognize as love, right? Because everybody is different, right? God has created each person as unique human beings, and that means we communicate differently, we might see things differently, feel things differently, and we have different ways that we express and receive love. And Dr. Chapman calls that a love language. Yep. Okay. So when you are trying to show love to the other person, but the other person is not recognizing it, and they might be trying to show their love for you in their own way, but you're not recognizing it because you are very different people, that's when I think relationships get in trouble. And he calls it not speaking the same love language. So in his many years of working with couples, Gary Chapman has noticed some patterns in how different people tend to express and receive love and group them into 5 categories.
So we're going to look at each of the 5 love languages and just give a brief description and some examples about them. And so these 5 love languages express in ways people receive and give love, just like Marsha was saying. And all of these ways are nice things to do. I mean, people, they're not negative, they're nice things. Most people will say, oh, that's nice. But when there's certain things that'll connect with each of us depending on what our love languages are, certain acts of love will really connect. It'll make you feel like your heart's melting. And where other things won't. So trying to figure out your partner's love language and making an effort to speak that love language to them will really help your relationship. I mean, it can turn a relationship that looks like it's heading toward destruction, and it can turn it around and breathe and make it alive again, make it come alive again, and rebirth that relationship. It'll feel, like Marsha said, it'll fill their love tank, and which will in turn make you feel more loved in return from them. So it's worth your investment. That's what we want to start out before we get into it, is it's worth our investment to learn these love languages and learn to speak our partner's love language, because it can, like I said, it can really vitalize a relationship. So what are the 5 love languages? The first one is words of affirmation. You look lovely today. Okay. But this is the most common love language percentage of the population-wise. And a definition of the words of affirmation is they're words that communicate your love, appreciation, and respect for another person. They're positive words and phrases used to uplift someone. So you've all heard the phrase, it's a real common phrase, actions speak louder than words, right? We've all heard that, right? But that's not true if your love language is words of affirmation. In this case, words are everything. Words are everything for this person with this love language. So words of affirmation can be spoken, or they can be written down. You can write little notes, little Post-it notes, stick them in places around the house. You know, Marsha and I have done that before. So, and but a person who has this love language, they place a lot of importance on what you have to say to them. That's what's really critical important, what you're saying to them. And conversely, if what's coming out of your mouth is always negative, biting, critical, and the person you're speaking that to has the love language of words of affirmation, I mean, you're heading into trouble, right? So you can see that right there. So just being aware that that's your partner's love language is huge. So your words speak volumes to them, even when you would prefer to say nothing, or you think they should already know how you feel about them. You know, there's an old meme or joke I've heard where there's a man who says, "I told you I loved you on our wedding day. If anything changes, I'll let you know." That might be working for him. But if the wife has words of affirmation, that's a disaster, because she needs that, daily words of affirmation, words of love. So simple phrases like, I really appreciate how you do so and so, or I love the way you helped with, just little phrases like that can fill their tank. The tank goes from empty, you can see it just going right up to full. It goes a long way to making that person feel loved and appreciated. Your partner will especially appreciate compliments, heartfelt thank yous, handwritten notes, and hearing what they mean to others. You really meant a lot to so-and-so when you reached out and helped them. So the goal for the person who has words of affirmation, is that by using words, let the partner know how much they mean to you and how much you care about them. So Marsha's good at words of affirmation, at least from my perspective. She claims it's not her love language, but she's really good. She frequently compliments me when I do work around the house, if I clean the house, doing the laundry, cooking meals. So she'll compliment me and thank me for that, and it touches me deeply. And her words, they make me feel good, they make me feel loved, they make me feel warm inside. So,
Yeah, as we were preparing for this talk, it actually surprised me, or it was actually gratifying to me, that Dan thought that I was good at words of affirmation, because it's not something that comes naturally to me. And it's not something that was present in the family that I grew up in. I don't think I ever heard my parents say, "I love you," to any of the children until we were adults, maybe. And then I certainly never heard them say it to each other, And I knew that I was loved, because they did a lot to take care of me. We're an immigrant family, and they were busy with doing things to make sure that our needs were met, right? But there wasn't a lot of warm, fuzzy words, or, like words were more like, do this, do that, or this is what's going on, or this is how you might do things better, But because that's one of Dan's love languages, and I think for our son also, I've really had to be intentional about finding ways to connect with them by speaking words. I am proud of you. You did that really well. I was impressed, or being specific about the things that they do that you appreciate, and to tell them that you love them frequently. Like we said, sending an unexpected love letter or a text. This is really good. Complimenting them in front of other people. That really scores a lot of points and fills their love tank, because not only are you speaking positively about them, you're telling everybody else about it. So, and then if they're down, offering words of encouragement and reminding them of their personal strengths. So, and I've really had to kind of be intentional about trying to do that, both for my husband and my son. So some other examples might be, I'm happiest when I'm with you, or you're an amazing dad, right? Or I couldn't do this without you. I really love the new outfit. It looks great on you, right? And you can do that, again, like we're talking primarily about couples, but you can do this with anybody, right? Anybody you're in relationship with, especially if that might be their love language. So be intentional yet genuine.
Good. So the second love language is quality time. And this is the second most common love language, according to the percentage of the population. So a definition of quality time is, this quality time centers around togetherness. And it's all about expressing your love and affection with your undivided attention. When you're with your partner, focus on them. And when you do that, it touches their heart in a way that really matters. They feel important, loved, and special. Like you are intentional in setting aside time just for them. So I feel closest to Marsha when we do spend quality time together, when we do shared activities. Like we go for walks with our dog, Buck. He's a nice little beagle. So we go for bike rides, hikes. And once in a while, I play tennis and golf. weekly. So sometimes she'll even play tennis with me, and on a rare occasion, she will play golf. Very rare. But when she does, it means a lot to me because I know she really doesn't like it. She says that she doesn't play golf, she plays croquet because the ball just stays on the ground the whole time. So, but she, like on Father's Day, her and Nathan went golfing with me because I had asked if they would. And well, it was a blessing for Marsha because after the third hole, a thunderstorm came and rained out our round. And she was actually kind of happy about that, but she didn't let me know that. But yeah, I feel really close when we do quality time together and with shared activities, and we're actually focused on each other.
Right, and yeah, I would say that is Dan's primary love language. So you have primary ways, secondary ways, tertiary ways, I guess. I don't know. But so how to give your partner or your child or anybody else in your life that's important to you, how to give them quality time. Make eye contact. Use active listening skills, like, okay, I think this is what you're trying to tell me. Is this what you're trying to say to me, right? And repeat back what they said to you to really listen to what they say. Setting limits on technology. Now, that's really important these days because everybody has a phone with them at all times. And it is, unless you're intentional about focusing on the other person, it's really easy to be in the same room but not really connect in a way that will fill the quality time person's love tank. So you have to focus on quality, not quantity, because there's no way you can be like focused on your spouse or anybody else for 24/7. I mean, you just can't, right? We all have to do other things in life, like we talked about. But I think for a person with quality time, like if you can set aside 15 minutes a day to listen to them and connect with them, and they know they can count on that, I think that really makes a huge difference. It goes a really long way in filling their love tank. And then once in a while, make plans to do things together, to spend quality time together. And maybe doing something that they enjoy, or maybe hopefully both of you enjoy, but like Dan said, you can score extra points sometimes if you go and do something that you wouldn't normally enjoy yourself, but you're doing it just because you want to be with them. I think that really touches a person's heart when their love language is quality time. So like if you plan ahead and say, okay, we're gonna do this on that day, like I think just anticipation of that time, I think can actually make your partner or whoever it is, child, parent, friend, it can carry them a long way because they're anticipating that they'll get to spend that time with you if you have a history of following through on what you promise, right? So some of the examples might be to try the new restaurant in town on Friday this week. Make plans to do that. And if trying new restaurants is not in your budget, maybe pick a day where you're going to cook together, and follow a recipe or whatever would be enjoyable to you and the other person. Like Dan says, scheduling a bike ride on Saturday morning, planning a leisurely walk alongside the riverbank on Sunday. So like doing things like that, again, it's probably not practical to do them every day, but if you set aside time, like a small amount of daily time to connect and then have some big things for them to look forward to of time with you, I think those are really good ideas. So another tip might be to develop a routine. Look for small ways to connect with them on a daily basis. For instance, you could pray together in the morning, or you could read a devotion or a thought for the day together and talk about it. It doesn't necessarily have to take a ton of time, but having a routine like that is important for the quality time person.
So, what are some mistakes to avoid if your partner has quality time as their love languages? So got a couple here that we should just avoid. One is complaining about the time you spend together. You're out on the bike ride and like, I really should be in the office. I got all this stuff to catch up on, because that just kind of deflates the whole mood, right? So don't do that. Another common mistake is to avoid is being distracted by your surroundings when your partner is talking. So let's say you're at a restaurant, you're dining outdoors. We do like to do that in Minnesota because of we don't get much nice weather here. You're outdoors dining, but you're looking around, your partner's like pouring her heart out to you. And you're looking around at the beautiful surroundings and the people, and so that communicates that you're not invested, right? Another common mistake is not putting your phone on silent, taking calls, answering texts, and you're texting, and and if it's a moment of quality time, it just ruins it. So, and then another mistake to avoid is viewing your quality time partner as needy. What I mean by that is a person who does not have quality time as their love language might consider this like, she's needy. She just needs all this time with me. Can't she be more independent like I am, right? It's that whole, they're not like me. And it's like, well, duh, they're not like you because nobody is, right? So don't view them as deficient or needy just because quality time is their love language. And then forgetting to ask what your partner needs in order to feel loved. So ask them what do you really need to feel loved? And especially if you see them kind of like having some distance from you. So
Or complaining that you don't spend enough time with them. That's a big clue.
That's a
right?
big clue, yep. So the person with quality time as their primary love language, the time together with you makes them feel loved and fills their love tank.
The next love language is receiving gifts. And Dr. Chapman says of all the love languages, gift giving and receiving is the most easily understood. To some people, it might seem like if your love language is receiving gifts, and that's how you know that the other person cares about you, they might think you're materialistic or greedy or focused on yourself or things like that if that's not their love language, but it is yours. But that's not the case. It's not really, it's the thought that counts,
Right.
or being trite, right? But for a definition, Mark Williams, a licensed mental health counselor and relationship coach, says, if you or your partner's love language is gifts, that means that you feel loved or that you are demonstrating love with a tangible item. Whether that item is a tiny trinket from a thrift store or a 50-foot sailboat is inconsequential. Or a Lexus tied with a red bow, right? It doesn't matter. Both gifts convey the same message. I was thinking about you when I saw this, and I got it for you because you're on my mind.
So gift giving is not Marsha's love language. And I found that out when we were dating. Like, in girlfriends I had before Marsha, their love language was gift giving. So I found that like bringing some flowers just made them like melt. They were just so touched. And I would do it for Marsha, and she would show appreciation because she's nice, but it didn't have the same reaction. So, and so her reaction when I bring flowers, and I do it once in a while just because I like to, and she appreciates it, but her reaction is more about, well, how much? I hope that didn't cost too much money, because that's how she thinks about it.
Right, I'm very practical.
Yeah.
So I do like flowers. I really do. I enjoy looking at them, but that's not really melts my heart.
Right.
And I am like, don't buy me roses on Valentine's Day because they're gonna
prices,
right?
Yeah, right,
So,
right. So how can we express love to somebody who has the gifts love language? Well, like we just said, you can send them flowers because that's their language. They're going to respond well to that. You can pick up their favorite snack food when you go to the grocery store. Give them tickets to their favorite show or concert. Or give them a gift certificate to a restaurant they've been wanting to try. Have coffee or lunch delivered to them at their work. That stuff like that really hits their heart. Or leave a card for them to find when they wake up in the morning. If you leave earlier in the morning, just showing a little card saying how much you love them and appreciate them. All these are great ideas for somebody who has the gift love language. Now, note, giving gifts to a loved one with this love language, it doesn't have to, like Marsha said, it doesn't have to break the bank. You don't have to be affluent to do this. You just got to, like Marsha said, it's the thought that counts. That's really what's most important. And anything that they can hold in their hand, that's what's important. It has to be something tangible for the person with this love language. And, that lets them know you thought about them. You gave thought to them, and you're thinking, you're on their heart, you're on their mind. And it reminds them of how much you love them.
Right. So it's the object that symbolizes your love for them.
So the fourth love language is acts of service. Acts of service. And this is the third most common love language by population. So a definition of this love language is doing something for your partner that you know they would like, such as filling up their gas, watering their plants, or cooking them a meal. So if you know your partner's love language is acts of service, then you're one step closer to making them feel loved. Because it's easy to do, depending on who you are, but it's relatively easy to do nice things for your partner. And when you get this positive response, it feeds your motivation to keep doing it. And it produces a really happy relationship. So let's look at 4 ways to show love through acts of service. One thing is, for a person is to pay attention to details, to small things. The person who responds to acts of service, they notice the details. So, like what your partner wants to do on your next trip together. If you plan details, they will respond to that thing, the small things. How much cream you put in their coffee in the morning if you bring them a cup of coffee. If you don't pay attention and it's way too much or way too little, there's only a couple drops in here, it's going to deflate the acts of service because, it's important to them that it's done right. And so what time your partner's favorite show is on, let's say you arrange the schedule, well, your favorite show's on it. So I stopped working now so we could watch it together. That kind of stuff really hits. And if you can't remember, take notes. Put down little reminders in your phone that, it's time for my partner's favorite show. It's time to do this. And that's a great way to remember.
Another way is to consider the things that your partner doesn't enjoy doing. So if they tend to complain about taking out the trash or taking care of the financial paperwork or paying bills or emptying the dishwasher, folding the laundry, etc., and you volunteer to take those tasks off their hands and do it for them, I think that really fills the love tank for somebody who doesn't enjoy doing them. Like if they don't like, or if you have more patience than they do and they hate calling the cable company, but you offer to do it for them and you stay on the phone for an hour, right?
With the nice music.
Right, yeah. And all the prompts, right? Your call is very important to us. So, but doing things like that will really fill their love tank if their love language is acts of service. Focus on acts that are easy for you to accommodate into your schedule. Pay attention to your partner's calendar each week and see what you can do to make their life easier. Like maybe if they have limited time between their morning workout and their first work meeting, maybe you time it so that breakfast is ready for them, like when they come home from working out. Like those details might really speak to them. And utilize your strengths. If you know how to do something that they don't, offer your services. If you're more handy than your partner, focus on handyman tasks like changing their oil or fixing the broken light bulb in the bathroom or, doing taxes or, whatever it is. Even if your partner prefers another love language, acts of service can be beneficial for every healthy relationship, right? According to a 2016 study conducted by the Pew Research Center, more than half of all married couples believe that sharing housework was a major importance in a successful marriage. That makes sense, right? Yeah. So whether it's part of your love language or not, but it's important to make sure that you and your partner are both satisfied with how much work you do around the house. But if you know that this is their love language, it is essential. And by your not doing the acts of service, they will take that and be really disappointed by it if you do not do things for them that are,
Good.
Thanks.
Well, the fifth and last love language, and popular with some of us, is physical touch. So, a physical touch, a definition of that is a person with this love language prefers physical expressions of love over all other expressions, such as verbal compliments or gifts. So person with this love language, you could be lavishing all these other things on them, compliments, acts of service, words of affirmation, all these things, but all they really want is a hug, right? So it's important that, physical touch just is what means the most to them. So thing to note, though, is that physical touch as a love language is not all about sex, although sex can be an important aspect of a romantic relationship. But an expression of love through physical touch, it can be a lot of things. It can be a hug, like I just mentioned, a shoulder squeeze, a hand hold, even a pat on the back. What about tickling?
No,
Oh, dang.
not tickling.
Marsha doesn't like to be tickled, but in my family I grew up, and tickling was part of a way to show love. So I've learned to not tickle most of the time. So even if you have a different love language, though, than physical touch can still play, obviously, an important role in communicating love. So what are some ways to show physical touch? We all know, but I just wanted to make a few comments about it. Of course, kissing is an important part of physical touch, right? Kissing is one of the easiest, most effective ways to show your physical love to your partner. You can kiss their lips, their cheek, their forehead, their hand. In many cultures, kissing, of course, has, and throughout history, kissing has different meaning in different cultures. It can be an act of respect, greeting, affection. Even in the Bible, it says, greet each other with a holy kiss. So do you guys get big smooches when you come in at Wooddale here? Okay, but no, different culture, I understand. But kissing was used in rather romantic and non-romantic contexts. Another expression is holding hands. Who doesn't love seeing a couple walking down the street holding hands? So, and then science has shown that even holding hands can release mood boosting endorphins. So it just makes you feel, that's that warm feeling you get when you are holding hands with the one you love. Parents often hold their child's hand for safety, but also it's a way of connection. It's a parent-child bonding that happens by holding hands. And so overall, just hand holding is a great way of showing physical love to your partner. Now, I noticed when you're in Korea, sometimes like girls will walk down the street holding hands together, where we might think that's a little weird, but it was a way of showing that they're friends, right? So I thought that was kind of cool. And then there's cuddling. You can cuddle with your partner when you're watching a movie, when you're laying in bed. Physically wrapping yourself around your partner makes them feel better. It makes them feel secure, warm, loved, and it bonds you physically and emotionally. So, and then skin touching, just touches, little touches like that. Sometimes it can be sexual, but it doesn't have to be. It can also be a sign of intimacy, warmth, and love. Touching your partner's hair, caressing the back of their neck. These are all ways to express love through physical touch.
You forgot my favorite.
Oh, Marsha's favorite.
Back rubs.
Yeah, she loves back rubs. So she feels loved when I give her back rubs. So this is a brief summary of Gary Chapman's 5 love languages.
All right. And really, many relationship issues come down to the fact that communicating love can be lost in translation, right? So all of us, our tendency is to show love in our own love language, right? I mean, you do unto others what you wish they would do unto you, right? So if it's natural and most easy to show love in your own love language. But if your partner or your child or whoever it is has a different love language, then it can get lost in translation. So let me just give some examples here. If your if you have the love language of acts of service, but your spouse has love language of quality time, right? So you're doing all these things to love them and to take care of them and to demonstrate how much you care about them, but it doesn't seem to connect with them. They're like, that's nice that you did it, but what I really want is to spend time with you, like not with you doing all these things for me, but I want to spend time like connecting with you and spending quality time where you're focused on me, right? Or if your love language is physical touch, but your partner would prefer words of affirmation, right? So you're trying to be affectionate because that's how you show and receive love, but your partner is feeling starved because you haven't said any nice things to them, right? And they're feeling like they might even feel like you're trying to use them, like for their body, if you aren't filling their tank with love language, their love language. And I have an example of this with a couple that I know. So the husband's love language was acts of service, right? And the wife's love language was physical touch. And so there was one day where he was, and he did grocery shopping, and they lived on a third floor walk-up apartment without elevator, right? So he had bought all these things. He went to the grocery store and did all these bought things, and he had like these 5-gallon jugs of water, purified water, right, that they used that he got because he knew that's what she had wanted. So, and then he asked his wife, would you come and help me carry these things up? And she said, no, I'm tired because I already did a lot of things today. So he carried them up, and then he walks in, and she is on the couch watching TV, and that really wounded him. Or maybe he asked her when he walked in. Yeah, I think he walked up with the first set, and he asked her to help because she was watching TV. And she's like, no, I'm really tired. I already did a lot of things today. So that really wounded him, and he says that was the turning point in their marriage where he knew this is not a person I want to be married to, because he's like, for him, if anybody actually asks him to help, unless he is on his deathbed, he's going to get up and help them, And then because her love language was physical touch, so like later he's fuming, right? Because she didn't get up to help him, and but then she wants him to come sit down on the couch and cuddle with her to watch TV, and like he's too angry at her. He doesn't want to do that, so he withdraws and goes into the other room and gets on the computer and does whatever. So it's just a way of how the love can be lost in translation. She didn't think it was that important to him, but to him, that was everything. You're gonna
Just go ahead.
Okay. So if your family didn't show much affection, but your partner's love language is physical touch, it's going to feel awkward, or whatever language it is. If it's not your natural one, it's going to not feel natural, and you're going to have to learn how to do things because it is worthwhile.
Yep. It's like learning another language. So if you for example, if you fall in love with someone, you're an English speaker, and the person you fall in love with only speaks Russian, you're going to have trouble communicating, right? I mean, there's going to be a lot of grunts and
Pointing, sign language.
But not much is going to be communicated. That's just an illustration of what it can be like if we don't learn the other's language. Lost in translation, like we're trying to say. So if you can learn Russian, and the Russian person can learn English, and then you can communicate, right? So that's what we're talking about with the love languages.
Right. It might take a while for it to feel natural, or, like it's hard to learn another language, but we all can do it, and we can make efforts to learn it and communicate to them in a language, love language that they will understand.
So to wrap things up, showing love in a way that your partner recognizes and receives is very valuable, like we said. It's worth the investment in understanding. It's worth the investment in learning another language. And Marsha and I's hope and prayer is that this will make a difference in your relationships. with your significant other, with your children, with your family, with your friends, that they will feel loved by the way you communicate with them. And if you're not sure what your partner's love language is, there is a quiz available. Did we have it? I think we put it up in the PowerPoint.
Or it's in the
It's on your it's on your handout sheet. There's a hyperlink there. Just
5lovelanguages.com, and the 5 is the number 5. 5.
All right. Thank you so much, you guys.
So we are going to open it up for Q&A in just a second. That 5 love languages test deal, it's awesome. So if you haven't taken it in a while, I just did that today and came back to what mine was. What do you think my number 1 is? Dan, you've known me for a long time.
Acts of service?
Nope, not close. Not close. Words of affirmation, number 1, 40% for me. That's where I am. And my wife does speak a different language than I speak, and right? So it's so important to understand that. My daughter's a Spanish teacher, and we get, it was fascinating. When she was like in her study in Spain, where she spent a semester abroad, she began to think in Spanish and began to think differently and dream differently. You were talking about like when your spouse does an act of service for you and they're on the phone and they listen to the jingle for an hour. Remember when MNsure rolled out? Maybe you never had to get on MNsure. I had to do the MNsure thing when the Affordable Care Act happens. I have nightmares in the MNsure jingle, all right? Like I speak that language. I can to this day, 24 hours on hold over the course of time. The first time I tried to get on, 28 hours the next year. I've got that song down, okay? But when we learn to speak the love language of our spouse, it is like speaking another language, and beautiful, beautiful things happen. All right, so we've got a question in the back, and I'm gonna bring this back there so that the people online can hear.
You said that acts of service is the 3rd most common. What did you say was the 1st most common and the 2nd most common?
Words of affirmation is the most common in the population, and then quality time is the 2nd most common. No,
We have Marsha changed the order around as how popular they were in the general population, but I go, let's just keep it the same order then.
Okay, so it is. The order you have it on the list then is the order of...
The way it's in the book.
Okay.
Right. So 1 is the words of affirmation. 2 is quality time. 3 is acts of service.
Okay.
I was really tickled by so much of what you said. Of course, my sweet spouse here. But I was so tickled because he's pretty much got me down, and my friend has got him down. But there's just always some light humor in it. And the example you put up of acts of service, which is one of mine. I've got like 3 on here, but I like them all. But he's dominant. But you had all of my acts of service: gassing up the car, that's his job; ordering my plans and cooking my dinner.
So you got your homework put out for you.
He does
it. He's
so
great.
you feel
He's great.
loved and content
All right.
in your marriage, right? Because your tank is full.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, somebody else. Question, comment. Yeah, Marcy.
Can they evolve or change over the years? The love language?
Yes, somewhat. So I think depending on, so they give an example. So like if you, if later in life, like maybe it's not your primary love language, but acts of service, it might mean more to you if you're super busy and your spouse does stuff for them. But I don't think they change a lot. It might be like your primary and secondary love language, like one might become more important at different stages of your life. But I don't think you would like change completely in what you would, how you are created and what you would prefer or to be loved.
Yeah, I would just add that it's much easier to change the way you show love to your partner in their love language than for them to change how they feel loved. That's a much harder thing to change. Does that make sense? Yeah.
All right, somebody else. Questions, comments? Yeah. Okay, so the question has to do with kind of family of origin, and if you've experienced maybe something in your childhood and you didn't receive love in a particular way, does that impact the way that
Yeah,
you...
it certainly does. And an example, I was going to tell it in the presentation, but we were getting late on time. But my family, my dad was the common stoic German guy. He would never talk about how his feelings were. So after I got like educated and went to college, I started trying to probe him, and it was like you couldn't do it. You couldn't get him to, I would ask probing questions. Dad, how do you feel about, how did that impact the way, and you don't get anywhere with him. But if my grandma and grandpa Schauer, they're exactly like my dad. It was always, I loved going over to their house, but it was always surface talk. There was never any depth. And my grandma, we were kids at the time. We'd get up and give her hugs, but she would, just kind of like, she wouldn't like cringe, but pretty close. So all that to say is my dad was, a duplicate of his parents. So.
Right. So I think it can be, it can definitely affect how your family of origin can affect your love language. You might kind of repeat those things, like if you receive that as love, or you might be starved for something, or like that's why maybe like there's several kids in the family, but the kid whose love language is physical touch and didn't receive it might be more wounded than maybe some of the other kids who had different love languages. So
Yes. Good question. Good question.
That is a good question. I think, just a hunch, I don't have scientific research to back it, our culture has gotten more individualistic, and people are, you guys know, a lot of people are pretty isolated, unless they have family in town, but, people who are living here amongst us, and their family's far away, and there's no connection. Unless you're involved in church, where are they going to connect? At the bar, with sports. But that connection, that missing connection is what perhaps makes us more, when we do have the opportunity to hug, we're missing it so much that it prompts us to long for it more and do it more. But that's just a thought.
right, and yeah, my guess is, societal norms change all the time. So the way you show love in physical touch, if that was your love language, maybe you did it more in private, not so much in public. But cultural norms are constantly changing.
Certainly, yeah. I think about my dad's generation, and his dad wasn't a hugger per se, but there was almost a reactionary moment where, like, my dad and his peers, they were huggers because they didn't get that maybe from their father, and they were trying to overcompensate on some of that too. And so sometimes, there's a swing just culturally that way too. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So if you're Swedish or Norwegian or German, that will seem over the top for you. So we're going to take you on a mission trip to Africa, and that's going to cure that for you.
Yeah. Or
they're going to hug you. If you go to
Right.
Russia, they're going to kiss you on the stage when you first meet. And that was new for me when I went to Eastern Europe
it
for
was
the first
not
time.
like that in a
was,
Korean family either, right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
I remembered meeting Dan's family, and actually even before, like, mom's like, "I love you." It's like, "You don't even know me. We haven't even like met in person."
Yes,
Right. So
yes.
they're just so affectionate in Dan's family.
But again, if your love language is not physical touch and somebody comes and hugs you for the first time, it's going to be a little weird too. Like, this is different. And so understanding love language, by the way, so that, the book, The 5 Love Languages, it's one of the top 5 selling marriage books even today, over 20 years after its release. You can go to Amazon, you can look at the relationship books, it's still there. But for those of you who are parents or grandparents, they've expanded that to the 5 love languages for kids or for parents and those types of things too. Even as an employer, if you manage people in a workplace, knowing what their love language is really, really important. When I know that I have words of affirmation people working for me and I have annual reviews that I'm writing, it's going to be really important the words that I choose, because a words of affirmation person can take maybe a corrective statement, and it can, the dark side of words of affirmation is you have a really hard time dealing with constructive criticism, right? So how you phrase that matters. Or that employee who just time together is their love language, knowing that, okay, when I manage this person, having some time to just have coffee with them on a regular basis, to sit down and to just kind of listen to what's going on and put the phone away and do those things, that's an important deal, and we've got to make sure that we're paying attention to that. So, all right, one more question, because it is 1 o'clock and I want to let you go, but any other questions around this? And the last thing that I'll say, okay, yeah, go ahead. Oh, really good. Yes. Great point. Yes. So the comment was, with all these love languages, and boy, if you've got a big family, or even if you don't, if you're married, forgiveness and mercy is going to have to play a part. So, yeah, absolutely. Well, hey, I do recommend that you take that inventory. I do think that our love languages can change sometimes based on situations and stages of life. And so what I see in our office a lot, and there's not a week that goes by that we're not dealing with marriages that are in crisis or families that are in crisis. Already today, I've had lawyer recommendations for divorce. I've had counselor recommendations for kids in crisis and other things that are going on. So we're always, faced in different stages of life, and all of those things that are happening in our life can impact us. So I see a shift a lot of times in a couple of different stages, from the newlywed stage to I've got kids. Some of that euphoria of the newlywed stage to all of a sudden, now we're balancing careers and children and trying to figure out how to do this. Love languages can sometimes shift. And I find that for one or the other spouse, acts of service becomes a big deal in those child-rearing years, especially if you're both working jobs and trying to raise kids, that like helping out, like one of the spouse, that one almost always emerges in a spouse. And then when the empty nest years come, I'll oftentimes see the active service person be like, I don't know what's happening, but those acts of service don't mean as much anymore. Well, they probably don't mean as much anymore because your kids aren't making the mess that they were making, and you're able to kind of manage it a little bit better. But time together seems to kind of come up a little bit further. Even if it was like number 5 on the list, all of a sudden you're longing a little bit more for that because your household shifting a little bit. So some of those relationships that you had, and maybe your kids were filling some needs that they shouldn't have maybe been having them fill, you're looking for your spouse to meet some of those needs too. So we see that a lot in those stages of life. That's a generalization, I know.
That makes sense. Yeah.
But I do see that shift a lot in people. So if you're finding yourself at a transitional stage of life and you're going, what is wrong with me? I can't speak love to my spouse the way that they understood it anymore. Take that test on there and just see, are there some things that have changed? And I know on me, words of affirmation will always be toward the top. And that's just kind of a words of affirmation person, kind of always stays a bit of a words of affirmation person, but those numbers 2 and 3 gifts kind of shifted for me too from when I took the test last. So just some thoughts. All right. Well, next week we're dealing with difficult people. So come on out. 2 weeks from now, Kyle Robinson was going to speak, and he actually got called away. So we are not going to have that session, and we'll kind of make sure people know he's going to give that session in the spring. He had an important meeting that got put in his agenda kind of last minute. So our strengths one that we were advertising last week is not going to happen 2 weeks from today. And then you've got the schedule for September through December. We don't anticipate that changing, but every once in a while, something happens. And so if we can find somebody to take that spot on the 17th, we'll communicate that. Look on our website. The website will be completely updated tomorrow with all the lunch and learns through like February or March. I think we've got all those booked right now. And so just, again, great speakers coming up. Pastor Dale and Marsha are going to do 2 together this year, which is going to be kind of fun. We don't have it on this calendar, but they will be back in February to do one on intentional grandparenting. So, we get to hear a lot from our pastor on preaching sermons and that kind of stuff. I asked him, I said, I love how you grandparent. And a lot of our churches never had the chance to see that. And his grandkids are long distance grandkids. So anybody who has long distance grandkids, kind of circle that one on your calendar. I think you're going to enjoy that. All right, have a great week. Thank you.